Morning, everyone. We are now up to Perek Zayin Mishna Zayin. And again, continuing with the case where we had two boxes. One box was Truma, one box was Chulin, and we don't know which is which. And then things happen after that. Quick introduction. There is a halacha called Gidulei Truma. What if a person takes kernels of wheat, let's say, that are Truma, and he plants them? What's the halacha regarding that? So if it was done inadvertently, the sages obligated the person to plow whatever he planted, to plow it over, plow it under, make sure it doesn't grow anymore. If you did it intentionally, they asked to allow it to grow. And when it grows, it is considered truma midrabanan. It's considered rabbinic truma. Actually, if you take the truma and you plant it and it turns into new produce, but the Rai say it's not the old truma. However, midrabanan, according to rabbinic law, they gave it the status of truma. That's when it comes to a person who plants truma, and that's called gidulei truma, the growth of truma. So if you do it inadvertently, you plow it under. That's what we obligate you to do. And if you did it inadvertently, you have to let it grow, and what grows has the status of truma. So in our case, what happened was, Zara es achas mehen. You took one of these boxes, which we do not know. Is it truma? Is it chulin? You planted it. Okay, what happens now? And we're talking about that he planted it inadvertently, but we don't know what did he plant. Did he plant the truma box? Did he plant the chulin box? Putter, he's exempt, meaning he is exempt from having to plow under what he planted. Whatever he grows is considered chulin. Again, leniency that we apply here, being that we don't know whether it was truma or not. And we're talking about truma, that the nature of the truma is rabbinic. We can be, in this case of doubt, we can be lenient and say that, and basically assume for the purposes now of what to do with this box that was planted, that we don't know if it's truma or chulin. We could basically assume it was the chulin, and whatever grows, we treat it like chulin. Bashnia, now the other box, the one that's still left around, how do I treat it? So, as we said previously, noig ba b'truma, you have to treat it like truma. At the end of the day, just because we treated the box that was planted like chulin, again, we only treat it like that misafek because we have a doubt. But actually, we don't know which box is which, and therefore, the remaining box has to be treated misafek out of doubt like truma, which means someone who's not a kohen may not eat it. We have to protect it from becoming tamei, from becoming impure. V'chayeves b'chala divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds that, being that we don't know what it is, whether it's chulin or it's truma, we have to practice the stringencies of both. And just as we treat it like truma to say a non-kohen can't eat it, we have to treat it like chulin, that if it was made into a dough, that you have to separate challah from it, which you don't have to do by truma, but by chulin, you do have to do that. Rabbi Yossi Paiter. And as we had before, Rabbi Yossi exempts this doubtful situation from challah, because just like in the case of meduma, when chulin falls into grain that's chulin, and the grain was not 100 times more to nullify it, we say that, so it's a doubt, we have to treat it like truma. Nonetheless, we do not obligate challah to be taken. If you take this meduma, you turn it into a dough, you don't have to take challah from it. Here too, where we have a suffix, a doubt, whether what we have here is truma or chulin, here too, you do not have to separate challah according to Rabbi Yossi. So this is what happens when you had two boxes, one is truma, one is chulin, you don't know which is which, you planted one. Zara achares hashniya. Now somebody else went, took the other box, and he planted that box. Putter, again, he's exempt. At the end of the day, each one is doing his thing separately, and therefore we judge each one separately. Here too, again, we don't know, is it chulin, is it truma? And in this case, the sages said that in this case, when you plant it inadvertently, you don't have to plow it under. You can assume we can assume out of doubt that this was the chulin box, even though before we knew the other one also was planted. But this one is a separate case in front of us. We can assume it's the chulin. What grows is not going to be considered. It does not have to be plowed under. It's considered chulin. And again, these are all leniencies that are applied by all these rabbinic laws. Zara echad eshteyen. Now, what happens if one person plants both boxes? Now already we're not able to necessarily to ignore and say, well, this one we look at this way, there's like that way. One person planted both. He did both. And if he did both, we know that he planted Truma. At the end of the day, one of the boxes was Truma. We know he planted Truma. So what do we say here? Now, once you've planted the Truma, it's a bit of a different story than what we had before. Before we have you plant it inadvertently. When you plant it inadvertently, the halacha is that you have to plow it under. But before, we didn't even know if we had Truma. So therefore, the Chafetz said you can be lenient enough to plow it. You don't have to plow it under. But here, you planted Truma. You did. You planted Truma. So what happens here? What happens here when you plant the Truma? And it's planted already. And we have Truma over here. What are we going to say here? So we say, B'davar shazara chala mutter. Regarding something that its seed decomposes before it germinates and sends out new roots, there what was planted is permissible. What is planted is permissible. That means like this. If we are talking about something such as wheat or barley that decompose as they send out roots and germinate, then we say the yield of this planting is given a leniency. And we say that it does not have to be plowed under. The rule is that we mentioned before that when you plant Truma, so inadvertently, you plow it under. Intentionally, you got to let it grow, and whatever grows is treated like Truma. What if you did that to Meduma? What if we shouldn't say that? We have a case where we know you planted the Truma, but again, we don't know where the Truma is. Right? You planted both boxes. So we know you planted Truma, but we don't know, but we don't, and so you planted Truma, but we don't know what's going to grow as to whether it's Truma or it's Chulin. We don't know. It was a mixture. We don't know what's Truma, what's Chulin. So in essence, what we have here is a very similar case to Meduma, when Truma fell in and got mixed together. Now, there are certain circumstances by Meduma that we make a distinction between a produce that, again, a case we're talking about, there's a case where we have a difference between whether we're talking about a type of a grain that before, when it produces more, that when you plant it, it produces more, it decomposes, or it doesn't decompose. By Meduma, we found a difference that where it decomposes, like so to speak, comes something else. The old thing goes away and now something new comes. In that situation, we are lenient. In a case where basically you replant the bulb and something grows out of the bulb, but the original bulb is still there, they're restringent. So here too, the Mishnah is going to say, in the situation we planted both boxes, and we know that you planted Truma. We know that you planted Truma already. So now the question is, what do we say now? It's different than before. We didn't even know if you planted Truma. Now we know you planted Truma. So what do we say here? So we say like this. We say that if what you planted is something that it's a type of species that the seed decomposes before it sends out roots and germinates. So then we say in that situation, you can be lenient and whatever is in the ground is permissible. Even though we know that somewhere here, there's Truma here, it's permissible. This is similar to a case of Meduma where we have a mixture of Truma and not Truma. And being that we're talking about something that decomposes before it grows further, we're lenient and we say, it's permissible. We don't look at it as Meduma. We don't look at it as a mixture. But if we're talking about something that the seed does not decompose, so as they explain here, like garlic and onions, where the bulbs generate new plants without decomposing, in that situation, we are going to consider what has been planted here as Meduma. It's a mixture of Chulin and Truma. We're not going to ignore the Truma because the Truma is here. It's something there where it's a type of species where the seed does not decompose. And in that situation, we know by a regular case of Meduma, whatever the situation there was, we would be stringent in that situation. So to here, where you planted the two boxes, one is Truma, one is Chulin. We have a mixture of Chulin and Truma here that was planted. And we know that's what happened because one person planted both. In that situation, we say, so we kind of have here a Meduma. We have a mixture of Chulin and Truma that have been planted. So if we're talking about something that decomposes before it grows the new thing, then we'll be lenient and say where everything is permissible. We don't look at it as meduma, as a mixture. But if it's something that does not decompose, then we say we have a mixture of truma and chulin here, and therefore then we'd have to go ahead and be stringent and treat what we have here as meduma. Now, if you think about it, there's an interesting question that we can bring out here. All right, so now you planted both boxes. We're talking about something that doesn't decompose before it grows a new plant. So I have here a mixture. I planted here. I have a mixture of chulin and truma growing. So how much of this mixture is considered meduma? According to some, the whole thing is considered meduma. The whole thing. Now, don't forget, it's not a regular case where it mixed together with something and there's a question of nullifying or not. We're talking about the whole halach of gedulei truma, where you plant truma, and rabbinically we consider it like truma. And here we are considering it meduma because it's a mixture of both. But how much of now this whole mixture is considered meduma? According to Rambam says the whole thing is meduma. The whole thing is under question. There are others that say like this, that it's only that the growths are prohibited only proportionally to the smaller of the boxes. For instance, if the larger box contained 2 sa'as of onions and the second box had only 1 sa'a of onions in it, then only 1/3 of the new growth will be prohibited. There is no need to assume that there is any more truma than this. If we know that the smaller box was the truma, so according to this opinion of the Rebbe Malki Tzedek, he says that, okay, we know it's a mixture. We don't know which is which. We can't identify which one's the chul and which one's the truma. But nonetheless, we know though that we know the smaller amount was truma. In the mixture, 1/3 of it was truma. And therefore, proportionally, we can say in the meduma the same thing. 1/3 of it is truma, which means we have the right to go ahead and decide, okay, 1/3 of it, well, I shouldn't say that, no, we know that's not true. 1/3 of it is truma, which means that when I go ahead and 1/3 of it is truma. What's the practical difference of that? What will be the difference if I consider 1/3 truma or not? I mean, I still don't know which is truma, which is not. If I have to, right? So then it would be like this: 1/3 of it, I'd have to. I'm assuming 1/3 of it I'd have to give to the Kohen because it's truma. But the other 2/3 I wouldn't have to give it to him. I would sell it to him. So that's the difference if I consider the whole. Perhaps that's the difference whether I consider the whole thing meduma or not. Okay, 2 short mitzvahs this morning. Mitzvahs loisase shloilases malacha b'rishon shel Sukkos. Prohibition against doing malacha, forbidden work, on the first day of Sukkos. As we said, malacha means whatever would be forbidden on Shabbos. The 39 primary activities that are prohibited on Shabbos, plus their corollaries, are forbidden from the Torah to do on Shabbos. They are also forbidden to do on Yom Tov, unless we're talking about those certain ones that are needed for food preparation would be permissible. But otherwise, malacha is forbidden on Yom Tov just like on Shabbos. And therefore, we have here this prohibition on the first day of Sukkot, which according to Torah law, in Eretz Yisrael, there's 1 day of Yom Tov at the beginning of Sukkot. And on that day, we're prohibited from doing malacha. Shnamar, as it says, B'yom Harishon, on the first day, all work of labor you shall not do. This applies in all places at all times, both by men and by women. Next mitzvah, prohibition against doing malacha on Shmini Atzeres, the 8th day of the holiday of Sukkot. Shenemar, as it says, Bayom Hashmini Mikra Kodesh, on day 8, the convocation of holiness. Atzeres, it is a assembly for you. It is the day of assembly. Any kind of work of labor you shall not do. And again, in Eretz Yisrael, according to Torah law, you only have 1 day of Shmini Atzeres. We have Shmini Atzeres in Simchas Torah. Torah law is 1 day Shmini Atzeres, and in Eretz Yisrael, that's what's kept. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, we have 2 days of Yom Tov. And on the second day of Yom Tov, malacha is forbidden midrabanan, according to rabbinic law. This applies in all places, at all times, both by men and by women. Have a wonderful day.